I don't care what you say, the thumbnail this time pretty much fits. Redclaw has been chased off by having fruit thrown at his face, while a lot of Sharpteeth from older movies had to literally be killed in order to stop their rampage. He looks cool with the red stripe extending from his arm to his eye, but for his large size he does not match the ferocity of Sharpteeth we've seen in the older movies. Like this new gen series has really censored some of the stuff a lot of us saw in the early 2000s as kids. There is a bunch of different Sharptooth we've seen in the Land Before Time trilogy, and almost all of them are just carnivores on crack. But that got me thinking, which of these meth head dinosaurs are kind of unstoppable? From T-Rexes that are partially immortal, to aquatic menaces rivaling the Jurassic World Mosasaurus in size, we're going to be looking at the strongest Sharpteeth we have ever seen in the Land Before Time trilogy. But before we do, I think you know the drill. I discuss things like this all the time, and take subscriber suggestions for future videos like this one. So if you're looking for anything dinosaur or animal related in general, then you're in the right place, so hit that like and subscribe button and try to watch to the end. You can always unsubscribe if it's not for you. Shameless plug complete, let's look into the most powerful versions of these crash outs we have ever seen. Kicking things off, we're going right in with the very first big daddy of all Sharpteeth. The original Sharptooth has yet to be matched by any other in terms of raw destructive power or pure ferocity. This guy has been hit with so many things and survived, you'd think he has the totem of undying. The first time we see this guy is when he chases Littlefoot and Sarah, crashing through thorns the size of steak knives, just to get to these two football-sized dinosaurs, and then Hulk jumps over the entire thorn field directly behind them. This is when the real fight begins, when Littlefoot's mother sends him airborne into a stone wall. Instead of getting up and turning the other direction, he smashes through the structure and then goes right back to finish business. Somehow this thing jumps more than 100 feet onto Littlefoot's mother and tears into her like a raptor, and when he is shaken off, he immediately gets back up and smashes through some rock pillars that even a damn adult sauropod couldn't get out of. By the way, you're gonna notice that this guy breaks a lot of rocks and stones during his screen time. The only thing that stopped him, and this was just temporarily, was when a massive earthquake happened and he was sent to the Shadow Realm after Littlefoot's mother slaps him with her tail to save Littlefoot. This is not an exaggeration, that drop is more than 1,000 feet, so he not only fell more than 1,000 feet, but also had tons of debris fall on him. But did he die? Of course not. Only mere mortals could be harmed by something like that. When Sarah goes down to the location he fell down, the brat started to headbutt him since she thought he was dead. But just as she was about to do another, the demon dinosaur opens his eyes, and without showing any signs of injury, immediately starts to get up. When all of the little dinosaurs come together, this guy tries everything he possibly can to get to them. And I don't care how thick your skull is. If you smash your head into rocks and mountains, there's going to be some sort of damage over time, which might explain his mentality. In the final scene with him, he throws a mini tantrum, scratching his feet on the ground like a bull, and jumping up and down like a spoiled child who didn't get what they wanted, and all of this because he couldn't get Ducky. What I think is his most impressive feat besides surviving the fall was being able to shake an entire cliff face just by slamming his head into it, like he hit it so hard that Petrie fell off. His immortality, however, comes to an end after he is pushed off the ledge and a massive boulder falls on him and knocks him out in the water, and he drowns. To be very honest, if it was on land, that boulder wouldn't have killed him. His one weakness was a universal one, and that was not being able to breathe underwater. So during his time on screen, he matched the damage output of an adult Apatosaurus, survived more than a 1,000 foot fall, shaking an entire cliff face, and the countless scenes of him breaking through rock structures. Before we do go on, however, I'm just going to say it, the meanest Sharptooth isn't going to be on the list. He had barely a minute or two of screen time, and he was beaten by Doc. But to be fair, Doc is one of the strongest, if not the strongest sauropod in the series. For all we know, he could be stronger than the original Sharptooth, but he was much less maneuverable and ferocious. And to be honest, I think if Doc fought the first Sharptooth, he would have lost. So just because of his lack of feats and us hardly seeing him doing anything on screen, besides circling and scraping Doc's eye, I don't think I can put him on the list. The next Sharptooth may not be as vicious as the first, but he still continues the legacy of bullying the sauropods in this universe. Alright, so this one is going to have three different Sharpteeth, I should say, because I couldn't decide on just who would have the edge. Chomper's parents and the horned Sharptooth are two completely different species, yet the latter may be just as big as Chomper's parents and possibly more terrifying. We're going to start off with Chomper's parents, who are both T-Rexes that come looking for their baby in the Great Valley after they couldn't find their egg. Unbeknownst to them, Littlefoot actually found the egg in Chomper hatched shortly after. Now Chomper's parents share some of the same destructive DNA as the original, with them snapping trees taller than them in order to get to Littlefoot and the crew, and just like the original they bully sauropods, like first it was Littlefoot's mom, and then it was his grandfather. After Grandpa Longneck hits Chomper's mom onto the floor, she gets up and headbutts the adult sauropod to the floor, and would have almost 100% killed him if Petrie's mother didn't distract her and lead her into the forest. To be able to send an animal weighing more than 50 tons partially airborne just by headbutting it is a feat on its own. While some such as Red Claw can be driven off with some fruit or just Littlefoot's grandfather, it took both of Littlefoot's grandparents and a few other dinosaurs in order to send them off. These guys can also take a beating from other Sharptooths that are just as or bigger than them, more specifically Chomper's dad. I mean, the way he won was a bit cheap since it was by surprise, but hey, a win is a win, I guess. Next up we have the Sharptooth that not even Littlefoot's grandfather and Mr. Three-Horn wanted to confront. This Carnotaurus is not just one of the biggest Sharptooth, but also the biggest Carnotaurus ever shown on screen, even larger than Disney's version. So right off the bat, he's already much faster and has greater agility compared to Chomper's parents. This guy can zigzag like a ninja turtle, and then jump more than 100 feet, just to Rexy roar at Littlefoot and his friends before continuing the chase. I don't think most of you understand just how impressive that is, not just for this Sharptooth, but for any of that size. If a megatheropod even attempted to jump from a 30-foot drop, their legs would immediately be non-existent. He is able to smash through rocks without even noticing them, and eventually breaks through a massive cave-like opening near the end of the chase. But that alone wouldn't have put him in the same category as Chomper's parents. What did was his size and the fact that Littlefoot's grandfather, along with Sarah's father, refused to confront it. I know it isn't this big because of the distance perspective, but even if it was side by side the adult sauropod, it would have been the size of Chomper's parents or just slightly smaller. I mean, Littlefoot's grandfather and Mr. Three-Horn have taken on many different types of Sharpteeth. Even if they were outnumbered, they always made an attempt to fight them. Things such as Red Claw and the Allosaurus didn't put a single ounce of fear in Littlefoot's grandfather, and Mr. Three-Horn has taken on adult T-Rexes, but the fear on their faces when they feel this Carnotaurus coming was something that put me on edge. I mean, aside from the fast biters and the original Sharptooth, he has some of the best agility feats and is massive on top of that. It's only when he's distracted by a herd of smaller dinosaurs do the grown-ups come out of their hiding places. Now, there was never an interaction between the Carnotaurus and the other dinosaurs like Chomper's parents had. But if it was a one-on-one, part of me thinks the Carnotaurus would come out on top if it fought either of Chomper's parents. But you guys can let me know who you think would manage to come out on top if it came down to an all-out brawl. The next Sharptooth is however undoubtedly stronger than Chomper's parents, especially since it fought both of them at the same time and temporarily won. Here we have one of the few Sharpteeth to show a higher amount of battle intelligence instead of just behaving like a maniac. I mean, he does behave like that, but is smart about it at times. In the fifth land before time, Littlefoot and his friends end up on the island where Chomper and his parents live. We first get a glimpse of the Giganotosaurus or plated Sharptooth after it gets a scent of the baby dinosaurs in a bush, and it just decides to bite into the entire bush in hopes that Littlefoot and the others would be in there. Yup, he isn't the brightest when it comes to getting food, like the time he finally got into contact with the main characters. And he takes a bite out of a field of grass and flowers blindly, again in hopes that there would be actual food inside. With that aside, he has the same ability as the horned and original Sharptooth, which is jumping very far distances at a standstill and not breaking his legs in the process. He's got a good amount of strength too. In a situation like this one, most Sharpteeth would try again and again to break the piece of rock or simply give up. But when this guy realized he couldn't get to them, he just lifted up the stone and went back to his chase. When he was just about to get them, both of Chomper's parents intervened and went to fight him. Now you would think that's a wrap since each of Chomper's parents on their own is pretty strong, so he would have no chance taking on both at once. But no, this guy is able to take on both of Chomper's parents and briefly win. When Chomper's dad bites into his chest, he slashes him on the face and headbutts him onto the floor. And immediately after, without a break, he fights Chomper's mother. He recognizes her weak points and exploited it. He slashes her inner thigh to throw her slightly off balance, and then he just tail slaps her across the floor like a pimp does in New York. He would have taken victory if Chomper's dad didn't send him off the ledge with a surprise tail slap, the same way Speckles did to One Eye in Dinosaur King. If Chomper's parents were that big next to an adult sauropod, they would be at least 15 tons the bare minimum, and with the Giganotosaurus being around the same size of them, he would be within that range too. If I had to put him up against most of the theropods in the trilogy, I'd say he wins, because he not just has the size and maneuverability, but he also has the ability to exploit the weaknesses of his opponents and use that to his advantage. The only other Sharptooth I think would beat him, even though they're nowhere nearly as observant as him, is the original Sharptooth. I don't think any amount of strategy at the moment can save you from that crash out. Like I said in a previous video, this is the strongest Giganotosaurus ever displayed in a movie or series. He can get beaten by a fair amount of Giganotosaurs in video games, but any from an actual show would get mauled by him, and yes, that includes Zeb. But none of that would matter if he was to face the last Sharptooth on the list, who isn't even a theropod, but is the largest thing on the list by a fair margin. Last on the list is something that came straight out the Walking with Dinosaurs series, but with a different color scheme and not that big. This is the first aquatic Sharptooth on the list, and is poetically the largest, with this thing weighing more than 45 tons and 20 meters long. To be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if it was even bigger, with some people on site saying it's 25 meters and 50 to 60 tons, but I'll just put it on the lower end, and even at this size, it's bigger than everything else we've discussed so far. So this thing comes into the Great Valley from the ocean, probably on the search for food, because the storm spread a lot of the ocean fauna out. But lo and behold, it somehow targets Littlefoot and his friends, like it completely ignores this ichthyosaur and goes after the group on land. Unlike the Walking with Dinosaurs Liopleurodon, this one has enough power to not get stuck if it's on land, but one cool feature I saw, which I don't know if it was done on purpose or not, was the elongated teeth on the tip of the mouth in this shot, which is very similar to a lot of pliosaurs.
That was a very big, sharp-toothed swimmer.
With it weighing as much as a humpback whale, it's impressive that it's able to jump this high to catch Petrie and even do leaps like dolphins do. It also has a good amount of durability, being able to take a direct hit to the face from a large log, and moments later immediately getting up. And then the brats decide to somehow run into the log that is in the water instead of turning the opposite direction and going further onto land. Like, I don't get that. Anyway, it's able to rear itself upright and grab the log where it begins to bash it against the water. If a whale tried to position itself upright like that in place for a long period of time, it would be suffocated under its own weight. Only the smaller cetaceans like dolphins are able to do poses like this in the water, and even they can't do it as long as this guy does. In terms of fighting, he doesn't show much of that, similar to the Carnotaurus, but you can still get a grasp of his strength with just how massive he is. Like I said in my latest video, the Jurassic World Mosasaurus in the first movie is around the same size as this Liopleurodon in The Land Before Time, and if it came down to a fight, it would be close. They both are incredibly agile, with the pliosaur in my opinion just having the edge with everything we've seen. To be honest, I would have to give it to the Liopleurodon, but it could go any way. However, if we put it against Fallen Kingdom or Dominion's Mosasaurs, then that's an entirely different story. Regardless, the mere fact that it's a carnivore in the Land Before Time gives it the edge against most, because like the theropods, this one is a crash out that would be willing to put its own health at risk in order to get dinosaurs that wouldn't make up for half the calories it lost trying to catch them. So that's just about a wrap for this video. Some honorable mentions would be the Spinosaurus, who was relentless in his pursuit of his prey. And as I said earlier in the video, the meanest Sharptooth, who lacked any real feats, but his description by Grandpa Longneck would still make him one of the strongest. I just want to say that I see a lot of your suggestions and I do take them into consideration, some of which will actually be posted shortly after this one. But I will keep putting up polls like these for you guys to vote on, so keep the suggestions in the comments coming. Alright guys, don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you in the next video.